like the ultimate level of spiritual enlightenment, where would you actually go?
Oh man. I mean, probably a silent mountaintop. Or like a monastery somewhere.
Right, or maybe one of those 10-day meditation retreats where nobody is allowed to speak a single word.
Yeah, totally. Because we have this this deeply ingrained assumption that to find our true purpose, we have to kind of, well, escape our daily lives.
Exactly, we need to get away from it all. But today we're doing a deep dive into some sources that argue you're actually you're better off staying right where you are, like literally holding a broom in your kitchen.
Yeah, it's a wild shift in perspective.
It really is.
Yeah.
We are basically dismantling this whole idea that your mundane chores and your messy family life are somehow getting in the way of your purpose.
Right, because the perspective we're looking at today says those chores are actually the exact materials you need to build something profound.
So let's get into what we're actually looking at today. It's a massive paradigm shift.
It really is. So the material we're diving into comes from a pretty profound spiritual text. It's called The Journey of the Kingdom of the Divine Will.
Okay.
And it's based on the writings of an early 20th century mystic named Louisa. She basically recorded what she described as visions and these interior dialogues.
Right. And we should say right up front, regardless of your personal religious background, the psychological and philosophical framework here is just fascinating. We're reporting on what this text says because the ideas they're really striking.
Exactly. We're specifically focusing on the text's exploration of the spiritual journey of Mary and Joseph.
Right.
And how their hidden, quiet life in this small town called Nazareth is positioned not as like a waiting room for the main event, but as the ultimate engine for human potential.
I love that, the ultimate engine.
Yeah.
But before we get into the narrative of Mary and Joseph, we should probably clarify that core term, right? The divine will.
Yeah.
Because that can easily sound like, just vague religious jargon. Like in the context of this text, it's not just a set of rules you follow, is it?
Not at all. In this framework, living in the divine will means operating with this complete, continuous alignment with a higher divine purpose.
Okay.
It's not just doing good things. It's about the internal mechanism of like how and why you do them.
So it's deeper than just actions.
Exactly. It is substituting your own reactive, kind of ego-driven motivations with a deliberate divine intention.
Which is an incredible distinction. And it becomes so important when we look at where the story actually begins. Because it starts with Mary living in the temple in Jerusalem.
Right.
She spends, 10 years there?
Yep, 10 tranquil years.
10 years. So by all accounts, she has already achieved that ultimate spiritual retreat we were just talking about. She is immersed in tranquility, entirely removed from the noise and like the commerce of the secular world.
She is basically in the ultimate sanctuary. And her singular desire, according to the narrative, is to just stay right there, to dedicate her life purely to that environment.
But then the disruption happens.
Right. She receives this call, this command from God to leave the temple, return to the regular world, and get married to Joseph.
Which, from a conventional viewpoint, feels like a massive demotion.
Oh, totally.
It's like you finally get to the mountaintop, you find inner peace, and then you're told to pack your bags and move into a bustling, noisy neighborhood.
Right, back into the chaos.
Yeah. I look at that and think, why would leaving the literal house of God be framed in this text as a spiritual victory? Because to me, it seems like a huge step backward into the mundane.
Well, it challenges our whole definition of devotion.
How so?
We instinctively tied devotion and peace to a specific place, right? Or a perfectly curated set of circumstances, like I need my quiet corner.
Oh, absolutely.
Yeah.
I need my incense in my quiet time.
Right. But the text introduces this concept called absolute renunciation. The argument here is that true alignment isn't geographical.
Okay, that's interesting.
If you are only at peace when your environment is perfectly quiet and catering to your spiritual needs, then your devotion is entirely dependent on external factors.
Wow. It's almost like the spiritual comfort zone becomes its own trap.
Exactly.
Like if I say I can only be a good, patient person when I'm alone in a quiet room, then I'm not actually patient. I just have no triggers.
That is the exact mechanism at play here. So, by leaving the temple, she is actively letting go of her own personal preference for this pristine spiritual environment.
Right.
And the text frames this as a victory because her obedience to the call completely eclipses her desire for comfort. She recognizes that the higher purpose is found in the surrender itself, not in, the architecture of the temple.
Which means the act of leaving isn't a demotion at all. It's the ultimate test of whether the alignment is actually real. And she responds with her fiat, which is a Latin term meaning like, let it be done. It's this total release of personal agenda.
And that release completely clears the board. She has to leave the established institutional sanctuary to build a completely new kind of sanctuary out in the wild, messy reality of the everyday world.
Right out in the open.
Yeah, that absolute obedience is the required first step for literally everything that follows.
Let's look at what actually follows.
Yeah.
Because transitioning out of a quiet temple and into a marriage, that introduces a whole new level of complexity.
Oh, definitely.
It is one thing to be enlightened when you are solely responsible for yourself.
Mm-hmm.
It is entirely another when you have to share a living space with somebody.
Cohabitation brings friction. It just does. And the text spends a lot of time analyzing this holy marriage.
Good.
It positions their union not as an obstacle to spiritual perfection, but as the specific vehicle for it. The primary lesson it offers is that the strongest bond for a family is forged when both souls, quote, look in one direction toward that divine will.
Okay, let's be real for a second here. Looking in one direction sounds beautiful in poetry.
Right.
But anyone listening who shares a house with a partner or family, you know how fast that unity falls apart when you are arguing over like whose turn it is to pay the utility bill or what to make for dinner.
Oh, yeah. The dinner debate is real.
It's the worst. So are we supposed to believe Mary and Joseph just, glided around their house perfectly immune to the daily friction of two human beings existing in the same space? Does the text imply they were just perfect?
It is really easy to romanticize the narrative and assume they lived in this state of suspended animation where nothing ever went wrong. But the text actually offers a really grounding concept to explain the mechanics of their marriage.
Oh, what is it?
It refers to their relationship as the mirror of the divine will.
The mirror. Okay, how does that mirror concept operate when the utility bill is actually due?
Well, think about what a mirror does. It reflects whatever is placed in front of it, right?
Right.
When the text talks about them looking in one direction, it doesn't mean they never had to negotiate the practical logistics of survival. It means the bedrock underlying the relationship was a shared anchoring purpose.
I see.
When you and your partner are both actively trying to reflect a higher purpose, like serving each other, operating out of love rather than ego, the inevitable friction of daily logistics doesn't threaten the foundation.
So the friction happens on the surface, but the current underneath is moving in the same direction.
Precisely. If the foundational goal is shared, a disagreement about dinner is just a practical problem to solve. It's not a battle for dominance or a threat to your ego.
That makes a lot of sense.
And the text makes a striking claim about what happens when two people cultivate that kind of environment. It says that this shared orientation actively invites a divine presence into the home, transforming the physical space into what it calls a little heaven.
A little heaven. I love that. That phrasing completely democratizes the idea of holiness.
It really does.
It takes this massive, cosmic, untouchable concept and just shrinks it down so it fits inside a living room in Nazareth. You don't need marble columns. You just need two wills aligned in a shared purpose.
Which brings us to the actual day-to-day reality of maintaining that little heaven. Because having a shared foundation is the theory, but the hidden life in Nazareth is where the theory crashes into, a literal sink full of dirty dishes.
Right. And this is the part of the source material that really grabbed me, because it zooms in on the extreme micro level of their lives.
Yeah.
It highlights Mary performing the most repetitive, unglamorous tasks imaginable, sweeping dust off the floor, cooking meals, and it describes St. Joseph in his carpentry shop, turning every single hammer strike into a song of praise to God.
Yeah.
The text calls this divine labor.
Divine labor it's the crux of how this entire spiritual framework operates. It is the practice of uniting the physical exertion of your body with the will of God.
I want to compare this to how we handle chores today, because we hear a lot about mindfulness.
Oh yeah, mindfulness is huge.
Right. We are taught that to survive the stress of modern life, you should be fully present while washing the dishes. Notice the warmth of the water, feel the soap bubbles, and focus your mind so you aren't, stressing out about your inbox.
Right.
It's a tool to calm the nervous system, but divine labor seems to take that idea and just turn it inside out. It's a massive step further.
That is a crucial distinction. Modern mindfulness is primarily therapeutic and internal. Like it's about making your own mind quieter.
Yeah.
But divine labor, as presented in this text, is theological and outward facing. It isn't just about soothing your stress, it is about treating the broom, the cooking pot, or the hammer as literal sacred instruments to make the world holy.
Wait, so if mindfulness is about calming myself down, divine labor is almost infrastructural. Like my act of sweeping the floor with intention is actually putting a brick into the wall of a spiritual building.
That is exactly how the text describes it. Let's look at Joseph's hammer strike, for example. A carpentry shop is loud, it is dangerous, it smells of sawdust, and it requires intense physical labor. He isn't just mindfully hitting a nail so he doesn't smash his thumb.
Right, just trying to stay present.
Exactly. And he isn't just trying to find a quiet space in his head. He is consciously deciding that the physical effort required to swing that hammer is an offering of love. He substitutes the frustration of the labor with deliberate intention.
Wow.
Yeah.
That requires an incredible amount of mental discipline. I mean, to be sweating, dealing with a difficult piece of wood, and instead of letting annoyance take over, you actively choose to reframe the struggle as a connection to the divine.
And when you do that, the text argues that you completely dissolve the boundary between the sacred and the secular.
There's no difference anymore.
None. There is no longer church time and chore time. Sweeping the floor with infinite love means you are bringing the exact same spiritual weight to a dusty corner of your kitchen that a high priest brings to an altar.
That fundamentally changes the emotional equation of a chore. I mean, a mundane responsibility is no longer just a tax you have to pay before you can get back to enjoying your life.
Yes.
The chore actually is the medium.
Yeah. And the environment of Nazareth is described in the text as having a profound silence, but it emphasizes that this isn't an empty, dead silence.
It's full.
Right. It is a space thick with presence, cultivated entirely by these thousands of small, hidden acts of divine labor. And here is where the mechanics of the text move from the personal to the cosmic.
Oh, right, because it scales up.
Exactly. This accumulation of mundane, offered actions doesn't just result in a peaceful house, it generates a literal spiritual gravity.
And this brings us to this fascinating visual provided in the text. It's a sort of spiritual graph called the root to the word.
Yes. And to understand this graph, we really have to define what the word means in this context.
Right, let's clarify that.
In Christian theology, the word or the incarnation represents the ultimate merging of the divine and the human. It's God physically entering the human sphere as a person. It is the central world-altering event of this narrative.
And so the graph charts the increasing intensity of what it calls divine light leading up to that event.
Exactly.
It shows the light starting in the temple, then surging upward when Mary leaves the temple, which reinforces our earlier point about absolute obedience being a victory.
Right.
The light increases again through the unified marriage, and then it goes completely off the charts during the hidden, repetitive life in Nazareth.
Because the underlying logic of the graph is that every single action done in the divine will, every swept floor, every hammer strike, increases the capacity to attract that divine presence. It builds momentum.
The text uses this stunning imagery where the longing generated in Nazareth is so incredibly powerful that heaven actually begins to vibrate.
Yeah, vibrate.
The spiritual gravity generated by a quiet woman doing chores in a tiny unknown house literally pulls the divine down to earth.
It is a profound subversion of how we assume power works. The narrative states that it was the complete emptiness of her own will that created this magnetic pull, drawing the divine down to give humanity what the text calls the kiss of peace.
Okay, this is the paradox I really want to unpack here.
Yeah.
Because the text highlights complete emptiness of her own will as the source of a magnetic pull.
Yeah.
That feels entirely backward to the modern cultural framework we all operate in. I mean, today we live in the era of manifesting.
Oh, for sure. Manifesting is everywhere.
Right? We are taught that power comes from fiercely asserting our own desires. You have to visualize exactly what you want, speak it into existence, and impose your will on the universe. You are supposed to be completely for your own intentions.
Right. Very ego-driven.
So how does emptiness generate more power than assertion in this context?
Well, It is the central paradox of this entire spiritual philosophy. In our modern culture, power is about accumulation and noise. The bigger your ego, the louder your demands, the more space you occupy. But the physics of this spiritual text operate on the exact opposite principle. Think about the nature of a vacuum in literal physics.
Like when you remove all the air from a space.
Exactly. When you create a complete vacuum, an absolute emptiness, you don't create a dead zone. You create an immense, irresistible pressure differential. Nature hates a vacuum.
It rushes in.
It will rush in with terrifying force to fill that void.
That is a brilliant way to conceptualize it. It really makes it click.
So, in the spiritual logic of this text, the human ego, our personal agendas, our constant demands for how we want our lives to look, and all of that takes up space.
Right.
If you are entirely full of yourself and your own desires, the vessel is capped. There is just no room for anything larger to enter.
Your closed system.
Exactly, a closed system.
Yeah.
But by practicing that absolute renunciation, by completely emptying herself of her own ego and personal will, Mary creates a spiritual vacuum of infinite capacity. Because the nature of the divine in this text is infinite love, that love cannot resist rushing in to fill a perfectly empty, surrendered vessel. That is the magnetic pull. The emptiness isn't a lack of agency. It is the deliberate condition that allows infinite power to enter.
The kiss of peace, where the divine and human finally cross over, is only possible because they cleared the space first.
Exactly.
They didn't manifest a cosmic event by shouting demands at the sky. They drew it down by becoming completely empty of themselves in the quiet of their kitchen. It means the greatest event in their history wasn't triggered by an army or an emperor, but by someone who simply said, "Let it be done," and then went back to sweeping the floor.
Which brings this massive abstract theology right back down to the listener's immediate reality. The source material doesn't just leave this as a historical anecdote.
Right, there's a practical takeaway.
It provides a very direct, practical application for anyone engaging with the text, and it's formulated as a message from Mary to the mystic Louisa. It's referred to as the promise of the Queen.
What exactly is the promise?
The promise is, let me quote it roughly. My child, do not fear family life or mundane chores. If you do everything with me in the divine will, I will turn your home into a palace of light.
A palace of light. It's such a striking contrast to how we usually view our homes when they are messy or, chaotic.
Yeah, usually we just see the mess.
Exactly. The very things we fear are distracting us from our true purpose, like the relentless family logistics, the endless cycle of laundry and dishes. They are actually the raw materials needed to build the palace.
But there is a conditional if in that promise. They only become the raw materials if they are done in the divine will.
Right.
If the internal mechanism shifts from a begrudging obligation to a deliberate offering.
It requires a conscious decision, which the text encapsulates in a final prayer. It's this suggestion to start every day by offering your actions as a fiat. It is choosing to live in the reality of Nazareth, regardless of where your physical house actually is.
Right.
Your cramped apartment, your noisy office, your frustrating commute, that is your personal Nazareth.
It is an ongoing invitation. You don't have to flee to a silent retreat to find the sacred. The sacred is waiting to be built right where you are through the quiet, consistent alignment of your will in the most invisible tasks.
It reclaims so much lost time. It means no hour of your day is actually wasted. The time you spend sitting in traffic isn't just an annoying delay keeping you from your real life. If you empty yourself of the frustration and offer that patience up, it becomes an act of divine labor.
Every single act becomes an opportunity to generate that vacuum, to create that magnetic pull.
We've covered a lot of ground today, moving from ancient temples to the physics of a spiritual vacuum. But as we wrap up this deep dive, I want to leave you with something highly practical to chew on for tomorrow.
I love this.
Think about the most frustrating, repetitive, utterly mundane task you have to face. Maybe it's dealing with a notoriously difficult client at work. Maybe it's doing the fourth load of laundry for the week. What is the hammer in your life right now? The heavy, dangerous, or annoying thing you have to pick up and strike over and over again.
That's a great question.
If you were to take that specific task tomorrow, and for just that one chore, consciously, completely empty yourself of your own annoyance. If you were to surrender your ego in that exact moment and treat the task as a sacred instrument, how might your own little heaven begin to vibrate?
Wow.
Thank you so much for joining us on this deep dive. Until next time.